Well, as the president's top economic advisor would say, the biggest story of 2018 was the economy. I took a look back through the top stories of the year, from record gains on Wall Street to the renegotiation of trade deals.
I think it's the biggest story of 2018. I really do.
2018 kicked off with a bang on Wall Street, with the major indices setting records one after another. On the very first trading day of the year, the Nasdaq opened and closed above 7,000 points for the very first time in history, followed quickly by the S&P 500 passing 2,700 points the next day. But on the third trading day, this.
For the first time in history, up 105 in 9 minutes of trading to push it over that mark that we have never seen before.
And then just 13 days later,
the stock market continues to see record gains under President Trump as the new milestone is reached on Wall Street. For the first time in the country's history, the Dow Jones closed higher than 26,000 points today.
The market gains were pushed by a strong December jobs report, a trend which continued into the new year, with 200,000 new jobs in January as the unemployment rate held steady at 4.1%. President Trump attended the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland at the end of the month, telling the world,
America is open for business and we are competitive once again.
February saw the biggest job growth of the year and the largest jump since June 2016, as the U.S. economy added 313,000 jobs. But the high quickly faded for investors who switched their focus from the booming economy to the Fed's policy on raising interest rates. Fears over a rate hike sent the Dow into a tailspin, shaving 2,300 points in the first week of trading for the month. The president became laser-focused on trade in March, announcing his intention to impose 25% tariffs on imported steel and 10% tariffs on imported aluminum on the first day of the month, and signing the proclamation just a week later.
The president's signing of the proclamation implementing tariffs on steel and aluminum imports has been met with praise from some conservatives in Congress, but criticism from others. Yet one thing everyone can agree on is that it's time for America to finally address major deficits in trade.
Amid the tariffs, this.
This is Gary Cohn's last meeting in the cabinet and of the cabinet, and he's been terrific. He may be a globalist, but I still like him.
The president's top economic advisor was out after disagreeing with the new steel and aluminum import duties. President Trump quickly replaced Cohn with CNBC contributor Larry Kudlow.
I don't think the president wants a trade war. I think he's sending a signal that he wants to deal with unfair trading practices.
With Cohn out and Kudlow in, the president set out to tackle trade even further.
President Trump officially announces new tariffs on Chinese imports as his administration pushes for free and fair trade.
Amid the trade actions, the U.S. added 103,000 jobs in March, with the unemployment rate holding steady for the sixth month in a row, prompting the Fed to hike rates for the first time in 2018. The end of March also marked the end of quarter one, with U.S. GDP growth hitting 2% for the beginning of the year. The trade war with China officially ramped up in April as China responded with its first round of tariffs on 128 U.S. products.
China's retaliatory tariffs against U.S. imports affect only a fraction of bilateral trade, as Beijing finds itself ill-prepared for an all-out trade war with the U.S.
The U.S. Trade Representative quickly responded to those measures with tariffs on an additional 1,300 Chinese products. And China kept the tit-for-tat going with tariffs on 106 more U.S. products. But as the president focused on trade, the unemployment rate fell for the first time in 6 months, hitting an 18-year low at 3.9% as the U.S. added 164,000 new jobs. In May, the president tackled another deal he'd promised to end on the campaign trail.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
President Trump officially pulled the U.S. out of the JCPOA and vowed to reimpose sanctions before the end of the year, accusing Iran of violating the terms of the agreement. The trade war with China chugged on through May and June, with the Trump administration imposing tariffs on $50 billion of Chinese goods, China canceling imports of U.S. soybeans, and the U.S. then announcing 25% tariffs on an additional $34 billion of Chinese goods. But the president also began to focus on other trade deals.
President Trump says that he's looking forward to the G7 summit, where he does intend to fix trade deals to benefit the U.S.
And the stellar job growth continued.
The economy appears to be gaining in strength as 213,000 jobs are added in June.
As the economic boom continued, the Federal Reserve implemented its second rate hike of the year in June, pushing base interest rates to a range of 1.75 to 2% to combat the impacts of inflation. The end of June marked the end of quarter two, with GDP growth surging to 4.2%, the fastest rate of growth since 2014. The trade war with China continued in July as the latest round of Chinese tariffs went into effect at the beginning of the month. But the president also secured his first win on trade as EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker visited the White House.
We agreed today, first of all, to work together towards zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies on non-auto industrial goods.
And the job growth continued with the addition of 157,000 jobs and the unemployment rate falling to 3.9%. August kicked off with a bang on Wall Street.
Apple officially wins the race to $1 trillion in market value.
The iPhone maker became the first publicly traded U.S. company in history to hit the trillion-dollar mark. And Wall Street kept up the growth throughout the month, with the Nasdaq surpassing 8,000 points for the first time in history, before hitting its all-time high of 8,109 points, while the S&P 500 surged past 2,900 points. The market growth was spurred by trade wins as the president negotiated a new deal with Mexico to replace what he called the worst trade deal ever negotiated.
They used to call it NAFTA. We're going to call it the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement.
The U.S. and Mexico agreed to a preliminary bilateral deal to replace NAFTA, giving Canada the option to join at a later date. As the U.S. added 200,000 jobs in August, the number of job openings hit an all-time high of 7.3 million, with employers struggling to find new hires amid the record low unemployment. Small business optimism also surged to an all-time high of 108.8 in August, as U.S. business owners saw the benefits of the Trump administration's tax cuts and deregulatory efforts. The growth in big tech stocks continued into September, with Amazon chasing Apple to the trillion-dollar market cap on the second trading day of the month. The S&P then hit its all-time high of 2,930 points later in the month. Meantime,
we've placed massive tariffs on China, and the tariffs have really had a positive impact.
The president imposed his largest round of tariffs yet against China, taxing $200 billion worth of imports. He also signed a revised trade deal with South Korea, and at the end of the month,
it's my great honor to announce that we have successfully completed negotiations on a brand new deal to terminate and replace NAFTA and the NAFTA trade agreements with an incredible new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement called USMCA.
Canada agreed to join the new trade agreement between the U.S. and Mexico following weeks of tense negotiations. Consumer confidence surged to an 18-year high of 138.4 in September as the U.S. added 134,000 jobs and the unemployment rate fell to 3.7%. The continuing growth pushed the Fed to hike rates for the third time, and the third quarter GDP growth hit 3.7%, keeping the U.S. on track to surpass the president's goal for 3% on the year. The beginning of October saw the Dow hitting its all-time high of 26,828 points, pushed by trade optimism following the announcement of the USMCA. And the Trump administration's deregulation efforts surpassed expectations.
A new report from the White House Budget Office shows this year alone, the president has saved $23 billion and $33 billion since taking office.
The unemployment rate held steady at 3.7% in October as the U.S. added 250,000 jobs. All focus was on the G20 summit throughout the month of November as President Trump prepared to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. But first,
with our signatures today, we will formally declare the intention of our three countries to replace NAFTA with the USMCA.
The leaders of Mexico and Canada joined President Trump to sign the USMCA on the first day of the G20 in Argentina. and then on the first day of December.
We'll be discussing trade, and I think at some point we are going to end up doing something which is great for China and great for the United States.
President Trump sat down for a working dinner with the president of China amid the months-long trade war. The two agreed to a 90-day trade truce to work on a more free and fair trade deal. The final jobs report, to be released in 2018, showed the U.S. adding 155,000 jobs in November and the unemployment rate holding steady at 3.7%. The sustained growth throughout 2018 pushed the Fed to hike rates one final time to a base range of 2.25 to 2.5%. The president has indicated the economy will remain his #1 focus going forward as he begins working on his re-election campaign for 2020.
Our economic policy can be summed up in 3 very simple but beautiful words: jobs, jobs, jobs.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.